What's going on, YouTube family? Today we're going to be talking about why some banks are being closed, why other ones are getting bought out, and why quite a few banks are stopped lending. Now, unfortunately, I'm bringing you this story because a bank that I've known for quite some time in California, a great group of guys, unfortunately, they had to sell their bank to another bank, and it's a sad day. But the reason why they had to sell is the reason why I want to talk about things that are currently going on in the market, because I don't think a lot of people know this, and this is something that everybody needs to educate themselves on. Now, if you've been watching the news, you can see all kinds of little small banks being bought up by other big banks or regional banks, or even the big, Wells Fargo, Bank of America. Why do you think that is? The main reason why is because once you get yourself insolvent with too much debt, whether it's housing, commercial real estate, or auto loans, you have to have a certain amount of liquid capital on the books. And when those numbers get skewed, basically the FTC will show up and say, hey, you need to either get liquid now, or you're going to have to get bought out by another bank, or we're just going to take over operations to make sure that the people can get their money. And it's happening more and more often. Now, over the last 6 months, I've seen about 32 small banks get purchased up by either larger regional banks or the massive big banks. And I think it's only going to get worse. Now, I told everybody, small, like local credit unions and local banks are literally the lifeblood of small businesses. They are the ones that give people like yourself, your first auto loan, your first business loan, maybe your first credit card. It's very, very important to take care of these banks. But unfortunately, these little banks were trying to keep up with the Bank of America and Chases of the world, because when it came to auto lending, everybody was going out there buying these cars for crazy amounts of money, 130, 140% of LTV. And so the little banks were like, well, we need to keep up with these big banks because we need auto loans too, because they make a majority of their interest off of that. Every time you make a deposit, every time you give them maybe your savings, they use that money to make more money for the bank and give you guys dividends. But what happened was banks were losing so much money, especially the small one here that I'm talking about. They bought in tons of commercial real estate. Now, everybody knows that commercial real estate has taken an absolute nosedive. And what happened with these guys is if you basically have too much debt and it's not making money and your loan gets to be up for renewal, you have two options. You either renew the loan at a higher interest rate where your payment doubles, or you walk away from it. And a lot of people were basically just going up to this bank and giving them the keys to this building saying, we don't want it anymore. And they walk away from a 10, 20, $30 million loan. What is this bank supposed to do? Now they're stuck with all these commercial loans that they can't make any money on because nobody wants to rent them. Rent's down quite a bit, and the property is no longer worth as much because remember, your property's only worth as much as what you could rent it for. But one of the biggest things is the actual auto loans. Now, a lot of these small like credit unions and tier one banks will give regular people like yourselves, up to 130, 140% of LTV. But because of the pandemic and them trying to keep up with the big banks, they were bending over backwards, giving very, very low interest for people that really couldn't afford these cars, these massive auto loans. And what happened is every time, they would take one of these cars and sell it at auction, if there was deficiency. So let's just say they took this G-Wagon. They owed $50,000 on it. They repoed it. They take it to the auction. They sell it for $40,000. That's $10,000 that they got to eat. Wells Fargo, Bank of America, that's peanuts. They'll take that all day long and twice on Sunday. But these small banks and credit unions, if you get 4 or 5 of these every single week, you're talking $30,000, $40,000. They can't handle that. Sometimes it takes them years to make that much money in interest and deposits and stuff like that. So them losing so much of this money because of these bad auto loans, they don't have anywhere to go. On top of that, one of the major reasons why you're going to see a lot of these banks get closed, shut down, or stop lending is because at the end of the day, their assets are worth a certain amount of money, which gives them their lending power. So if I wanted to, let's say, go out and give $100 million to auto loans, I got to have so much collateral in my bank to show that it's worth it. So if Wells Fargo, let's say, gives me $100 million to go lend to these people, and when I lend all these cars, now I have assets that are worth, let's say, $110 million, the auto loans are worth more than what I owe. But what happens when the commercial property is not as worth as much, or your cars take a massive nosedive like they have in the last few years, and now let's say you specialize in Teslas, and you gave everybody a Tesla Model Plaid, and you borrowed all this money against them, and now those cars are worth 50%. Now let's say your portfolio is worth 60 million instead of 100 million. What do? You can't do anything basically no banks will give you money until you straighten out your books. Now, the only way to straighten out your books is to either sell the bad debt or take in more auto loans to offset basically your crappy loans. But when banks got really tight with this credit crunch, they're not going to give these little banks more money because they're basically stuck. So that's why you're seeing a lot of these small banks either not lending or basically saying, you know what, we can't sell this debt. Our portfolio is not worth as much. We're going to have to be insolvent. Let's call the FTC and basically buy ourselves out. And that's what's happening right now. And like I said, it kind of breaks my heart because some of these bankers I've known for over 20 years, and they've been buying and selling auto loans, home loans, commercial loans, even these guys gave me one of my first very low interest loans because here in Nevada, a lot of the banks kind of sucked and they wouldn't give me any type of really good deals. So I had to go all the way to California to get a single digit interest rate for a car that I bought a long time ago. And so you're going to see more of this in your local area. And that's what scares me is because it's these little local banks that actually take the risk on the actual community, people like yourselves. You can go to Bank of America unless you got a bunch of money and, a really big portfolio, maybe your house is financed with them. A lot of times they're not going to give you a loan. They're going to give you something super small. They're not going to help you, where a lot of these small banks and credit unions will try to do whatever they can to get you, to start your business, to do this because that's their job is they want to lend into the community because they're a community bank. And every time one of these things die, it's almost like washing away future dreams of other people in your community. That's why it's such a big deal. So if you look in your area and you start hearing all these banks, oh, the bank name changed, it was bought out, why did this bank close? How come they stopped lending? They used to lend all the time. These are the reasons why. This just lets you know that the economy is not as good as what they say they are. Now that the election is over, I think they're finally going to open up with some real numbers, and you're going to see how bad the economy is. Because when I'm on this side of the screen and we're looking at how banks are basically dealing with repos and how everything else is basically turning to crap, we could see it. But it's so hard for me to convey this through the camera, and think about it. My software company, which is Lonebridge, our whole job is to help them find cars that were either left, abandoned, towed, in accidents, stuff like that through VIN tracking. And we're booming with business because we know that banks are losing millions of dollars and they need to go find their cars. Because if people are just walking away from these cars, leaving them in a parking lot, that's just money that's basically just sitting out there. We see more and more of these cars hitting every bank's books, and it's going to affect the way they lend and how they're going to help other people. Because like I said, if auto loans are falling apart, they're not going to risk any money when it comes to new businesses or, if you need a line of credit, your kid needs braces, something like that. Small banks and credit unions are the ones that kind of push these things through. And now with these things happening, like I said, it's looking grim. So let me know in the comment section below if you know any banks or credit unions in your area that have either closed, been bought out, changed names, or just stopped lending in general. I like to share this with everybody because the whole purpose of this channel is to be transparent about the automotive industry as well as lending. So if you see anything like that, like I said, put the name of the bank. It's always good to share with other people because a lot of times you can go over there and make sure that one, the bank is still open, they have the title to your car. It's very rarely that you'll ever see a bank completely shut down because they will get purchased by somebody else. That's just what banks do, just buying other market shares because the government will help them out. But like I said, once again, I'd like to thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully the economy gets a little bit better. We're going to find out here after January, after they switch from one president to the other, if things balance out and things get a little bit better, which is looking like it. I've seen more bankers talk about possibly bringing more banking programs back because of the change from a Democrat to Republican. But only time will tell. At the end of the day, Americans are tapped out. Nobody has money. Student loan debt's at a record high. Credit card debt's at a record high. Auto loan debt's at a record high. Delinquencies and deficiencies are all at a record high across all three of those as well. So all we can do is hope and pray, and we'll see what happens. But once again, thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you next video.